How's it going, laser bruises? I'm over Sixkilla. Welcome back to Choices That Matter. And the sun went out. It's story time again. Time for us to continue where we left off. Now we're trying to board a plane to Peru, I believe. That's our next thing. For some reason we need a disguise. I'm not too sure why. I would just board the plane like a normal person. But we do have a gun, I guess. A pretend gun. Improvise a disguise. I went shopping. If I had to disguise myself, at least I was able to do it somewhere cold, where my body was already obscured. The most important part of a disguise is the face, I told Moti. A pair of sunglasses is just not going to be enough. Please elaborate, teacher. It's vital to alter or obscure my face, but I need an obvious reason for doing so, or I'll only draw more attention. I looked around me and saw two viable options. Shall I be a cross-country skier or a germaphobe? I'm not sure I understand you, teacher. Don't worry, Moti, I'll show you. Germaphobe. The mask is like real common at the moment. I started my disguise as with one of the cheap anti-flu masks every newsagent and chemist sold near the counter with the other impulse buys. Adding a pair of reading glasses for good measure. Putting them on gave me a squint, which was welcome. I bought every preventative travel medication I could find, then bought a new suitcase with a multitude of pockets in which to put them all. There were a number of identical black-wheeled suitcases, so I naturally chose the most expensive brand and continued on my way. I took off my coat and boots and found some orthopedic shoes which paired nicely with diabetic-friendly socks and fingerless mittens on a string. I was starting to get into character, and I had a lengthy talk with the cashier about an ache in my back that migrated mid-conversation to my shoulder, then my hip, and finally my neck. She sold me a set of travel cushions that cost over $100. I didn't blame her one bit. I only regretted being too late to hire a wheelchair. Explaining the process to Moti as I went along, I did my best to attempt at altering my voice to a quavering tone suited to someone perpetually on the brink of catching a variety of ailments. After that, I practically walked with a deep suspicion of every touchable surface, especially my fellow humans. At last I was satisfied. What do you think about your new owner, Moti? I asked. Beep beep. I was confused by the random collection of electronic sounds and finally took a guess. Are you laughing? Of course, you haven't changed at all. I restrained myself from expressing a surge of annoyance. Of course not, Moti, it's a disguise. The whole point is to change my physical appearance, which I have done. These physical differences are sufficient to fool other humans. Yes, Moti, almost certainly. I need you to remain silent as we board the plane. However, as there are a few moticon devices in the world. Yes, teacher. I went directly to my departure lounge and sat in one of the empty seats. The other seats filled up with the usual complement of howling children, wide-eyed dreamers, and tired people of all ages. Mr. Dolt passed by occasionally. I didn't even blink when he looked at me, but I knew he was there. At last, the right boarding call blared over the speaker in French and English. The noisy masses around me trickled gradually away. Mr. Dolt was passing, and he wandered over to the line of boarding people and carefully examined each one. My chosen character was not the type to stand in line, so I waited until there was almost no one left and finally moved toward the desk. I suddenly felt my chosen character was all wrong. Moti was right, the disguise was foolish. Struck mute with terror, I fumbled for my boarding pass and handed it over. Mr. Dolt was so close I could taste him on the air. His jacket smelled dusty and smoky and oddly familiar. He smelled like Professor Sol's house. I wanted to punch him in the mouth. I wanted to grab him by the jacket and yell at him for being linked to my friend's death. I wanted Professor Sol back, if only so I could live in a world where I could laugh off his paranoia again. I was so consumed with frustration that the open gate blurred in front of me. Enjoy your flight, smiled the attendant. I nodded and walked down the cheap carpet to freedom. Or at least to a lengthy flight and some airplane food, which was good enough for me. Attempt to sleep. I settled in and got as comfortable as possible, hoping to sleep after the long night. Moti? Yes, teacher? It's okay to make sound now. We're safely on our way to Peru. Switching to flight mode, teacher. Soft, relaxing music began to play and I smiled. My body began to relax at last. I slid towards slumber. Teacher? Yes, Moti, I'm awake. What is it? Where did Professor Sol go? That's a bit rough, isn't it? That's not an answer, teacher. It's because I don't really know the answer, Moti. No one does. My eyes filled with tears. Professor Sol was more than his physicality, but with his body dead, the essence of who he is no longer exists here on Earth. I blinked hard and kept the tears at bay. Perhaps Professor Sol is in some kind of heaven or even hell, but that's not something I can experience firsthand without dying myself, and when I'm dead, I won't be in a position to tell anyone else what it's like. I swallowed hard. Perhaps when I'm dead I won't care anymore. I don't know if that's comforting or horrifying. It's totally alien. It was beneficial to me to have Professor Sol remain present on Earth, teacher. He was unique. I miss him too, Moti. Moti woke me gently a little before landing. The weather is a fine 50 degrees Fahrenheit, teacher, and there is a 10% chance of an evening shower. I grunted in acknowledgement and rubbed my face, wishing I could have slept in a bed. Or at night. At least now I was where the company wanted me to be, physically, if not ethically. There was a hotel waiting for me, assuming the booking remained, since I was somewhat later than planned. You do not appear refreshed, teacher. Would you like some cheerful music? No, thank you, Moti, I said. I need to snap out of it and focus. I went to the bathroom and threw away the more ludicrous pieces of my disguise. Oh well, it wasn't like I was making crucial first impression anywhere today. All I had to do was get to the hotel and fetch the next packet of information the company had laid out for me. The collapse of Flare Energy had brought me some goodwill, since it had benefited General Resources. That was the main thing as far as the company was concerned. I hope General Resources Inc. had managed to profit from the most recent sun-related incident as well, hoping that it made them care about humanity's existence was too optimistic. Teacher, will we be safe here? I hope so, Moti. I'm programmed to learn and improve, and avoid harm to myself if possible. Cusco will be a very interesting place, I'm sure. That's very good, teacher. It wasn't quick or easy getting through the airport, but after waiting around and sweating and waiting some more, I walked out of a set of glass airport doors just like everyone else. Stepping out into the heat, I was surrounded by people with signs, vendors with snacks, relatives with tears of joy and lovers with kisses. Taxis and buses had already opened up to receive a deluge of bags, trunks, and all the weighty paraphernalia of travel. Strange to think that the sun was missing at the same time just a day earlier. I didn't like to think what the scene had been then. G'day, someone said loudly right in front of me. Hello, I replied in confusion before seeing she was a taxi driver and gratefully handing her my small bag. She grinned and led the way to her vehicle, tossing my things in the trunk and opening the front door with an exaggeratedly chivalric gesture. Despite being a taxi driver, she clearly wasn't born in Peru, but she bustled around her rattle-trap of a taxi with the ease of long acquaintance, so it was clear she'd found her true home in Cusco. Get in. Where to? She asked cheerfully. He asked Moti to state the full address of Santa Maria out loud. "Ooh-wee," exclaimed the driver. "That's one of them emoticon devices, isn't it?" I nodded wearily. "My daughter Chrissy is saving up her pennies to buy one. It'll take a while," she said. "Teacher, may I update now?" "What does the update involve?" I asked. "Bug fixes." "Sure, go ahead." "Thank you, teacher." "I'm Sharon, by the way. Aussie through and through and Peruvian as well these days. At your service. And I've been back and forth from your hotel every day for the last week, so we'll be there in a jiffy. It's a good thing too, since the GPS is on the blink at the moment." "Do you have family here in Cusco?" "Is your whole family here in Cusco?" She grinned in delight. "Yes and no. Chrissy's here at the moment for the festival. Her hubby and kids have already taken the bus back to their place, while Chrissy runs errands. Earns a few extra sol with her own taxi and visits me." I stared out the window, thinking about my next move. "Do you like living in Cusco?" My eyes widened in surprise. The voice came from the loudspeaker on my watch. "Since when did Moti initiate conversations with other people?" "I sure do," said Sharon. "Love the weather, love the mix of people, and I love the mountains. I came here to visit Chrissy when she first fell in love with her man. And I never quite got around to going home." She lifted her eyes to my face. "What do you do?" That's a vaguely. "I'm a consultant." Sharon's eyebrows lifted. "Is that so?" I murmured something non-committal, wishing she wasn't so perceptive. "For a pharmaceutical company, I take it?" she asked. pointing at the array of pills visibly spilling from my bag. If I said I had trouble with the last place I visited, and didn't want to bring that trouble with me to Cusco, would that be enough of an answer? She snorted. Not hardly, but in case it's not obvious, I don't mind a bit of trouble, especially since it's the truest thing you've said all day. I happen to trust my gut, and my gut says that you're all alright. You can choose to trust me in return or not. Either way, the police and I are best mates, so we won't be swapping tales about you anytime soon. Tell her you're researching the Sun incidents. With a sigh, I told her I'm investigating the Sun's disappearance. She pointed at her chin on her ID on the dashboard. Take my phone number. I know a really interesting historian who might give you some insight from a different angle to the one you people are pursuing. I had Moti record the number. Sharon went on. Frankly, he's a bit miffed. Everyone scientifically minded seems to be overlooking the past, even with the Inti Raimi festival that just happened right here. Oh, and I can throw in translation services for free. Thank you, I said. It's probably nothing, but just in case there's more trouble, would you mind not mentioning my investigation to anyone? I don't want my problems following you. Sure, she said, pulling up to the Santa Maria Hotel. This trouble you're in, Sharon continued. It's got to do with that golden-eyed group, is it? I froze and stared at her. It's a whole group? There's one particular golden-eyed man who's been going back and forth from the hotel to the airport a lot lately, she said. Like he's looking for someone. I felt my stomach sink. When did you last see him? Not since the festival, she said. I'm sure whatever was going on with him, it's over now. No worries. No worries, I echoed, stepping out of the taxi and wondering what I was getting myself into this time. I headed inside the hotel. It was clean and pretty without being extravagant enough to draw much attention. In short, it was perfect. The perfection lasted all the way to the front desk. Somehow the fact that I'd arrived several days later than expected to the hotel meant I needed to pay an extra service fee. I suspected Dolores had argued them out of a similar service fee over the phone, but I didn't mind letting the company pay their part in capitalism's endless dance. The room had the usual sense of deja vu that middle-of-the-road places give travellers after a while. Everything was where I expected it to be. Everything pretended to be fancier than it was. All the complimentary shampoos, conditioners, and hand washes were in the same bubbly substance, in different shades of pastel. The bed was big and white and gorgeous. The shower had hot water and white towels. Perfection was back. I washed off the dirt and grime of the 2 continents and laid on the bed, swathed in 4 towels and nothing else, feeling content to simply lie there clean and happy until the sun went out for good. I got hungry and raided the minibar, then got dressed in my least revolting clothes and called for room service to do what they could with the rest. Eventually, Moti informed me it was time to go fishing. My contact's information was hidden in the cistern of the toilet. I wondered darkly whose idea that was. I eyed the toilet while brushing my teeth and then opened up the cistern and found a waterproof package inside. I took out the contents and spread them over the kitchen bench. That was when I knew something had gone badly wrong. Thanks to the pile of cash and all those spare IDs. It's terribly handy to have so many photos of you now. I feel we're truly getting acquainted. Since we seem to be following one another, I took the liberty of arranging a meeting with your friend on your behalf. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. Do feel free to join us any time. You can find me in the main hall of the Sun God's temple most mornings. From your golden-eyed friend. Moti, I said, and my voice sounded very far away. Send an urgent message to Dolores. We've been compromised, and our contact may already be dead. Yes, teacher. Message sent. Dolores says that discretion is advised. No kidding, I muttered, wondering how long the golden-eyed man had been in the room and whether it was bugged. Yeah, change hotels at once. I sighed. Better to be safe than sorry. I gathered my possessions, checked I'd left no traces of myself other than all the clean clothes I'd never be able to collect, and left through the fire escape. I walked several streets away before hailing a taxi and faking drunken misdirections 3 times in 3 different taxis before actually thinking about where to stay. Along the way I ate dinner, bought a new wardrobe, changed my bag, and gathered a healthy pile of cash from several company credit cards at various locations. I couldn't even bring myself to throw away my own rubbish, in case I was still being followed. At least I consulted Moti about where to stay. They recommended the New Eastern Hotel on the basis that a multidisciplinary conference of some kind had just concluded, so there'd be plenty of rooms available. I might even be able to find someone to help me decipher Professor Sol's research notes, assuming I was able to find the research notes someday. I was reassured by seeing the sun rising once more as I finally entered my second hotel of the night. This hotel didn't have full-time desk attendants, so I made myself as comfortable as possible in the foyer and waited until the city woke up. A handful of other travelers waited beside their suitcases, looking outside at the empty row of parallel parking spaces lining the road. I guess they were on their way out of Cusco and had booked taxis in advance. They certainly had the look of people who were attending a conference. Some were relieved, some were invigorated, and some practically vibrated with the longing to be home. Several chatted together in various languages, not one of which I spoke. A group near me had brown skin and black hair like the Peruvians, but their faces were broader. One of them had tightly curled hair, and he was gesturing widely, arranging table ornaments to demonstrate his points. Teacher, shall I translate their conversations for you? Sure, go for it. The group closest to us is conversing in Bahasa, Indonesia, teacher. The man waving two coasters around is talking about the magnetic fields of large celestial bodies. Professor Sol was studying something similar as part of his primary hypothesis. Perhaps the man with the coasters could assist in your research. Thank you, Moti. That's very helpful. It was good to have an opportunity to waste. Standing, I approached the group and addressed the lively man. Please excuse me, but do you speak English? A little, he said willingly, but no Spanish. I'm not very useful here. Actually, it's your non-linguistic knowledge that interests me. I hired a researcher to study the recent sun phenomenon, and he made progress, but then we parted ways. I was hoping to retrieve his research notes sometime, but I'm no scientist. Are you? Yes, he said, leaping to his feet and shaking my hand. We're all scientists. He flung out his hand to embrace the entire company of people, a few of whom smiled back at him. You, me, everyone. We can see, we can touch, we can smell, we can think. That is science. Couldn't help smiling back at his enthusiasm. Do you think you could explain my employees' notes to me in a way that I could understand? Yes, he said again. Understanding and explaining is my field of expertise. I raised my eyebrows, wondering if he was a scientist at all. My degrees are in physics, geology, astronomy, and electromagnetism, but mostly I like to learn and teach. So that's what I do. I try to draw the lines between physics and geology, between astronomy and geology, and now between astronomy and electromagnetism. He laughed at my expression. And I try to draw the lines between one scientist and another, which is both easier and harder to do. Do you have your friend's notes with you? Call me Petrus, by the way. A good name for a man who studies rocks. Not his newer notes, but I have some of his older ones. Please hang on. I phoned Dolores and explained the situation at once, so we could collect everything we had as coherently as possible. It wasn't much, but I was able to quickly bring up scanned copies on my laptop. Ah, handwriting, Petrus said gleefully. A greater puzzle than archaeology. No offense to Dr. Rasheen. One of the women poked her tongue out at him before resuming her conversation. Let me see, Petrus continued. Not for the first time. I wish I knew how to open Professor Sol's diary. I wonder what he means by resonance. Could it be the same phenomenon Dr. Idrisil referred to as echoes? If so, your Professor Sol and my new friend Susanna from 12B she already left. More's the pity. Should get together and have a talk about heaven and hell. I'd like to see that. All across the foyer, people began gathering their bags and getting to their feet, exchanging farewells, ranging from kisses to formal nods from one professional to another. Oh no, said Petrus, it's time. He rummaged in his wallet and produced a battered business card. Tell your employee, Sol, to call me. I'd love to meet the man, with his head in the stars and his hands stained with ink. Whatever you paid him, I'll double it just to talk to him. He actually... But Petrus is gone. Meanwhile, the receptionist had arrived and the foyer had emptied. I let her pick a room, and then I insisted on a different one, just in case. After I checked the room for toilet messages, hidden electronic surveillance, and baddies of all kinds, I left my new clothes in a heap and went back out for breakfast. The hotel had been virtually booked out by the pack of scientists, and the breakfast bar was peaceful. I received a silent message from Dolores through Moti, telling me that my planned contact, Dr. Manuel Harris, was not responding to calls. She told me to leave Peru as soon as possible. Oh my god, we just got here! What's his address? Perhaps it's not too late to save him. My phone rang. It was Dolores. Hello, Dolores, I answered cautiously. Don't hello me. Do your job, she said. And if it's not too much to ask, stay alive. With that, she hung up. I groaned unhappily. Was another scientist dead already? Was it my fault for not coming to Peru sooner? Are you alright, teacher? Can I direct you to the nearest English-speaking therapist? Thank you, Moti, I said absently. You are my therapist. I am not programmed to provide emotional support, teacher. Talking to me does not constitute an appropriate course of treatment for your emotional distress. I'll be alright, Moti. Your pulse, posture, and facial expression suggest that your statement is untrue. Moti, please switch to silent mode now. Arranged to meet Sharon's historian friend. I called Sharon right away, asking if she could introduce me to his historian friend. Great idea, she said, if I do say so myself. From the second she arrived at my hotel, she gave me a running commentary on everything we passed, growing more and more animated as we drove through her own neighbourhood, even pointing out her own modest home as we passed. There was another taxi in the driveway. Oh, that's Chrissy, she said. Want to take 5? Why not? She slammed on the brakes and pulled in behind her daughter, making me glad I'd worn a seatbelt, even as it cut into my chest. We got out and went inside, where I could already smell some kind of tea brewing. Sharon sniffed appreciatively. Cocoa tea. I love this stuff. The leaves are great on their own, as a pick-me-up, and they sort out altitude sickness too. They're stronger and more effective than caffeine, strong enough to be illegal back in Australia. You're welcome to try some if you like. Actually, I did feel a bit lightheaded. I hadn't thought to blame the mountains. We walked into the kitchen and found a younger version of Sharon preparing a fresh pot of tea. Heard you coming in, she said. Hello. Oh, she said at Moti. Is that what I think it is? Moti beeped, like a performing dog at a circus, and the pair proceeded to have a conversation about RAM and OS that interested me only in that I hadn't known Moti would have full-blown conversations with other people. After a little while, Chrissy switched to Spanish and Moti happily continued the conversation. Made little difference to me. The tea was bitter but refreshing, so I chewed one of the green leaves that Sharon offered, and although it tasted pretty bad, I felt much livelier. Sharon managed to tear her daughter away from Moti so we could continue our destination. The historian's house was fairly run down, although it had been beautiful once, and was still large considering that only one person lived there. Like a lot of old Cusco, it was a mixture of Spanish and Incan architecture. Sharon knocked on the door and rang the old-fashioned bell pull, but there was no answer. She waited for some time before trying again, and then Sharon frowned and tried his phone. It went straight to voicemail, and she began to worry. We walked around the back of the house, and she pointed out the open window on the top floor. I visit him every week around this time, she said. It's not like he's an absent-minded professor or anything. He's completely reliable. I don't like this. Let's break in. I climbed up the trellis into the bathroom window, avoiding the mostly dead rose tree, still clinging there, and poked my head through the torn fly screen, balancing carefully on the sill as I drew the curtain aside and tried not to think about how stupid I'd look as I fell to my death. For a moment I had a horrible premonition I'd stumble upon the old man taking a bath, but the room was empty. It was too empty, as if a cleaner had just visited, or a photographer for a magazine. Neither was likely to have given the run-down nature of the house. Some people were tidy, but no one was this tidy. There was a clean, empty water glass on the sink. The weirdest part was the single-use toothbrush in the rubbish bin. Some people clean before going on a trip, but it takes an extreme form of OCD for a person to throw away their old toothbrush as part of a holiday ritual. I poked my head out the window. Something's wrong. I'm coming downstairs to let you in, but don't touch anything. I walked carefully down the stairs, seeing the same pattern everywhere. The historian was gone, and he wasn't planning on coming back. When I passed through the living room on the way to the front door, I saw a large buff envelope on the dining table. Bulky with more than just paper, written on the outside in large neat letters was a single word. Sharon. Tell Sharon what you found. I'm not going to look inside. That'd be rude. I went to the kitchen and found a dry cloth, using it as a makeshift glove to open the door without leaving prints, and exposing to Sharon what I was doing. She stopped only a few steps inside the door, raising her hand to touch a worn leather coat before catching herself and dropping her arm to her side. What is it? I asked. Nothing, she said, except that's his favourite coat. He never left home without it. Not even when it was a blazing hot day. We went together to look at the envelope. Sharon confirmed that it was his handwriting. You think he was forced to leave under duress? I asked gently as I could. No, she said slowly. Of course, he could be kidnapped, and then they could tidy up after him and force him to write a note for me, but that's not what kidnappers are doing these days. But the house doesn't feel like that, she flushed. It sounds stupid. Sometimes instincts are useful, I said. You know him? You might be picking up on something subconsciously. Tell me how it feels. She closed her eyes. When I was young, my cat went missing. Eventually I found her in the crawl space. Her body was there, but her true self was gone, and I knew she was dead just by looking. This house is like that. It looks the same, but the spirit is gone. I stared at her, impressed. Something was very wrong with this house, and we both knew it. It was exactly like a dead body, an empty shell. We were both getting creeped out. She shook herself and tipped the contents of the envelope out onto the scarred wood of the table. There was a map, marked with directions in pen. There was a short handwritten note, and there was a wooden cog the size of a large pendant attached to a string to be worn around the neck. Sharon grabbed the note, swearing softly in surprise that it was written in English. That pompous old coot spoke in Spanish just to mess with me. She read it twice, holding her breath, and then snatched the map just as I reached to pick it up. We have to go now. With that, she took the map and ran out the door. I grabbed the note and necklace and ran after her, sliding into the passenger seat as she started the engine. Where are we going, and why? I asked. North, then underground, she said, and shoved the map in my general direction. Congratulations, you're my GPS. Can I read the note, I asked? Yep, she said. Dear Sharon, I hope you can forgive me for all I've kept from you. So much knowledge has been lost that I may already be too late. I've spent my whole life chasing a few slender threads of information. I don't think I've gathered enough. I hope I'm wrong. If you're reading this, the sun has vanished a second time, and so I've gone to make an attempt to do what needs to be done. I strongly doubt that I'm worthy, but at least I'm willing. I know this much is essential. If the sun returns faster than before, then I've succeeded. I've enclosed a map for you in case you wish to pay your respects, since I will not be having a traditional funeral. There's another access route through the temple, but I've highlighted the easier path. Keep the map safe, as the treasures in the chamber are of considerable monetary and religious value. If I've proven unworthy, the sun may or may not return. Stay safe as long as you can. Are we going to find a body, I asked? Maybe, said Sharon, skidding around a truck and then swerving to avoid a collision. Probably. Yes, I think so. Moti, what do you know about this location? This map is incorrect. What do you mean, I asked? The historian altered it by hand in order to advise us the best route. Is that what's wrong? I have made a thorough online search, and although some parts of Cusco have unusual underground architecture, both natural and man-made, this cavern marked on the map does not exist. Sharon lifted her eyebrows. First, my historian mate speaks fluent English. Now he knows about a secret underground chamber. I barely know him at all. We parked on an unassuming street and followed the directions to what turned out to be an abandoned house. Not knowing what else to do, we walked deeper in, and deeper, until we realized the house wasn't ordinary at all. Fortunately, we'd known we were heading underground, and we turned on our torches to see the whitewash on the walls that was no longer covering plaster but dirt. And then it vanished altogether, and the hallway sloped sharply downhill before turning into steep dirt stairs. We descended, gratefully for the twinkling sunlight coming in from the shafts above to ease the darkness. Hola, called a woman's voice out of the darkness. Call back a greeting. Hola, the voice said again. Sharon? Sharon gasped and realized and replied in Spanish. The woman cried out in relief and soon appeared, carrying her own torch, which was orange from long use. She stopped when she saw me, but Sharon spoke even more rapidly, and it was clear she was vouching for me. The two women ignored me and continue talking. Shall I translate for you, teacher? I sighed. No, it's clearly personal. Finally, they remembered that I was there and turned to me in unison. You wish to visit Klegalf? Yes, said Sharon, giving me a wry smile as I realized exactly why she'd never told me the historian's name. Even the Australian genius for nicknames had let her down when it came to her friend's moniker. We followed our guide into the dark, where she switched to English for my benefit and softly told us of her own heritage. Living in the area for many generations, some say our name was Aya once, she said, flashing me a smile. There are owls that first made this place, she explained, but you may call me Ariel. Like the mermaid? Sharon asked, reminding me suddenly that she'd raised a little girl. Exactly. I was going to say something, but I forgot what it was, as the steps widened, and we soon stood at the top of the chamber marked on the historian's map. It was enormous, and I was astonished to think that people like Ariel had kept it secret for so long. I had no idea if Ariel truly believed in legends or not, but somehow But somebody certainly believed in something about financial gain, because I was immediately certain that the enormous statues standing around the chamber were covered in real gold. As far as I could tell, this place was nowhere near the famous temple, but there was no doubt it was both ancient and sacred. The two places were connected through underground paths, but ritualistically as well. In the center of the chamber, surrounded by more Peruvians, was a white mound, as if snow had fallen in a heap. As we reached the base of the chamber, Sharon gave a small cry and ran forward. I followed her slowly, closely observing the scene. The people parted before her, letting her throw herself to her knees beside the pile of white. There was flowers, enormous trumpet-shaped Easter lilies, piled in mournful tribute to the shrouded body that lay underneath. We'd found Sharon's friend. We also found his killers standing in quiet vigil over him, and I didn't know whether to run away from them or comfort them. Either way, I couldn't leave Sharon. Sharon knelt and wept, clutching the old man's hand. I took a few steps closer, seeing no aggression and no regret in the faces around me. Yet I was increasingly certain that Clegauth was dead because these people had killed him. There were no defensive wounds on his body and no signs of a struggle. His throat was pierced, not cut. It was incredibly precise. He must have kept very still for them. The place where he lay was a stone bed, carved with long grooves where his blood had traced dark patterns while he lay patiently waiting in the darkness, hoping he could bring back the light. I couldn't help wishing he could have spent his last minutes somewhere more comfortable. Ariel came and stood beside me. "Are you going to kill us too?" I asked. She flinched but recovered well. "Is that what you want?" "No. Are you mad?" "Not at all," she said. "Although there is this kind of madness and grief and frustration, but none of us are murderers. You must understand that. Not for our sake, but for your own." "Well, you won't let us go?" She sighed. "We're not in the business of kidnapping tourists." "What is your business then?" I asked. She ignored me. "There's not much we know for certain, but we know the sacrifice must be willing. Clegauth failed us, but it was not for lack of courage." I felt sick. "Who was us?" "The world," she said. "Please don't hurt Sharon. We won't even call the police. Just let us go." "I just told you we would," she said testily. "Now let your friend grieve in peace before you wander off to waste more time." Alright, we need to wrap this one up here because we're out of time again. I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I do not know. But it just keeps going. I guess we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.